You've been waiting for this day for so long. And now, the time is finally nigh. We are here.
I'm back.
We're back.
We back.
It's Morbid Message Monday in the building. Even with Jake fixing his fucking camera live.
Yeah,
guys.
Well, I mean, it wouldn't be us without that.
No,
Why are we in
not.
Tokyo?
That's a great question because you didn't make another one.
Okay.
I'm blaming you.
Sure, my fault. Whatever.
It's Matt's fault because he didn't make a fancy thing. But, folks, welcome on into another episode of Morbid Message Monday. It has been a month since we've done a podcast.
Yeah.
The last time we did a podcast was with our boy King Noose Me, which was fantastic. What?
That's
did we
not
do
true.
last?
The last one was Fresno Nightcrawlers.
Oh, you know what? No, was it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, fine. When was that?
I don't know, man. I was asking me to remember important things. Let me see. That's good. So Fresno Nightcrawler was on June 21st.
June 21st. So it's been
we a little bit
over a month.
We a little bit.
We're a little behind, but hey, it was a month off.
Yeah, no,
we are back for a year of Morbid Message Monday.
It's been a year. 1 year.
It's been a year.
So we conceived this horrible little thing.
Yeah, of freaking Morbid Message Monday, now known as Tech Mess Talks, but whatever, it doesn't matter. Don't question it. And it used to be just Tech Mess before that, so whatever.
Well, that's the thing, right? It evolved. It didn't die. It just evolved.
So in honor of that, we're going to play the first ever episode. I'm just kidding.
You guys are going to watch and enjoy.
And we are going to fuck off. All right. See you guys in a while.
Welcome to Morbid Message Monday.
Very crazy. I can't believe that we are freaking sitting here still doing Morbid Message Monday.
Weird.
It's awesome.
Cool.
It's awesome. It's just freaking
We were just
awesome,
reminiscing at how the YouTube is doing for Morbid Message Monday, Tech Mess Talks, really. And if you guys don't follow the YouTube for Tech Mess Talks, make sure you do so.
Yes, please.
If you ever miss some of this goodness, it's always there the next day.
It is. And it's available over on
Spotify.
our
Apple
Spotify.
Music.
Yes. It's everywhere, man.
Everything.
It's everything. It's everything.
I was going to start listing off podcasting platforms, but I honestly do not know.
But folks, today, for our special 1 year anniversary of Morbid Message Monday, we have what might be the most harrowing tale that I've ever researched. And that includes good old Willie Picton. Today, we are talking about one of the most violent occurrences in our own home state of New Mexico.
Right up the road.
Right up just about 80 miles from us. The Santa Fe Prison Riot, which was a horrifying, insane.
I didn't even know it was a thing, right? So you brought it up and I started looking at it. I was like, my God, how did this happen here?
Dude, right? And this happened in 1980.
Yeah, and then you start reading about it and you're like, oh, that's why it happened here.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay, then. So the Santa Fe Prison Riot. Oh, first of all, welcome to Morbid Message Monday. My name is Jake.
And my name is Matt.
And today, we are talking about the Santa Fe Prison Riot. So the Santa Fe Prison Riot took place February 2nd and 3rd of 1980 at the Penitentiary of New Mexico in the capital of New Mexico, Santa Fe. It was considered one of the most brutal and violent prison riots in our country's history. There were 33 deaths and countless injuries, and it went on for 36 insane hours. There were fires, there were murders, there were tortures, there were every horrible thing you can really think of.
Yeah.
And that's where we're going to get into the nitty gritty today. And I hope that you're all ready. It is truly a thing of nightmares. Prisoners completely overtook the facility for about 36 hours. The violence was completely out of control. There was blood everywhere in the cell blocks, murders, rapes, beatings, hangings, tortures. It's really the whole package. So,
reading the descriptions of like what the halls look like after this is terrifying.
It is.
It's bad.
It is on it. Like I said, it's harrowing and it's fucking insane.
Something straight out of a horror movie.
And you look at it and you're like, damn, people are really capable of some horrific things. And it's crazy because there's this is something that could have been avoided. And it's true.
Easily.
It easily could have been avoided for several reasons that we will get into as we go. But the first and foremost thing to keep in mind here is this could have been avoided simply through reform. There was so much wrong with the New Mexico State Penitentiary. Poor conditions for prisoners, improper housing of violent and nonviolent offenders, meaning they, housed together, and just a humongous variety of administrative issues.
Yeah, lack of staff.
Yeah, lack of staff. They were missing everything. Yeah. It was just really, really bad. A huge issue, however, for prisoners in particular, was the removal of rehabilitative, recreational, and all educational programs. I mean, that's, listen.
Well, that's a big part of like what prison is supposed to be, right? You're supposed to go in, get rehabilitated, be released back out into the public, a better person. But like they took everything away.
They didn't give you a chance. And you were truly stuck, right? Like there was no rehabilitative effort. And granted, there are some prisoners in there that were never going to be rehabilitated anyway.
Oh, of course.
Repeat offenders, some of the worst people. However, just because they're in prison doesn't mean they deserve what they got. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that obviously, and this is just my personal opinion, obviously if you're in prison, you've done something horrific and something terrible. And there's probably been moments in my life where I said that person deserves to die.
Yeah.
Like absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
But I think the thing to remember is, though they may have killed, they may have done something horrific, I don't think anybody deserves to die.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And that's just, I don't know, something that I've come across, especially reading about this, especially like the way that some of these prisoners died. Oh my God. Now that we've gotten all the mushy gushy out of the way, things began to seriously decline when a change in leadership happened in 1975. The prison saw a steep decline in trained correctional staff and an uptick in prisoner-related issues, such as a work strike due to poor conditions within the prison. The deputy warden at the time, Robert Montoya, saw it fit to not try to fix the problem, but to instead tear gas the striking prisoners. As they exited the dormitory, coughing from the gas, they were, and this is a quote, they were stripped naked and run nearly 100 yards down the central corridor through a gauntlet of officials who beat them with ubiquitous axe handles. This was called, so this was called the Night of the Axe Handles. Now, this itself is already a horrific thing, especially if you're looking at injustice within the prison system, not only here, but just in the United States in general. I mean, just listen to what happened here, right? We're not going to get super into it, but the incident was corroborated by several eyewitnesses, including some officials themselves, and resulted in serious injuries as well as a federal lawsuit. It was actually still pending in 1982, naming Deputy Warden Montoya and senior guard captain among the assailants. After this violent response to prisoners' concerns, one inmate, Dwight Duran, was prompted to draft a 99-page handwritten civil rights complaint to the U.S. District Court of New Mexico called Duran v. Apodaca, later to become the Duran Consent Decree. This is very important when we're looking at the Santa Fe prison riot. There's ample evidence from over 10 grand jury investigators between 1977 and 1979 about the conditions of the penitentiary. The P&M administration resisted the changes, and the legislature refused to allocate the necessary funds to make changes. The last time the U.S. District Court grand jury ordered improvements was in November of 1979, just 2 months before this riot. Now, prior to this, however, the prison administration decided it would be a good idea to try to coerce prisoners into becoming informants in a practice known as the snitch game. And it led to a huge increase in inmate-on-inmate violence, and there was now a culture of distrust among the inmate population. Now, this would be key to the violence that would ensue during the riot itself. So something to remember is the Duran Consent Decree was something that essentially was like, fix this.
Yeah.
Let's fix this problem. Like Night of the Axe Handles, if you really want to get down to simplifying it, is the reason for the Santa Fe prison riot.
Oh yeah, that was like the big lead up to it, right? And
Absolutely.
like on top of that, it's just the whole concept of creating a game where, like, you know, you reward prisoners for snitching on other prisoners. Like, who thought that was a good idea?
Now, I mean, to be fair, these prisoners that were known informants or snitches were held in cell block 4. You'll learn more about that later.
Right.
But initially, if you want to give any sort of credit to these jackasses, that can be said. I mean, they were held in their own block in a more quote unquote secure block away from the other prisoners. However, they were pretty much known as snitches. And this is
like, I mean, well, and you have to remember, like, this prison was not built the way like we look at modern prisons now. Like, it was very open.
Oh yeah.
So, like, saying that they were held together, they were held together.
No, they were, and there were the big problem within the New Mexico State Penitentiary, from my few hours of research on it, was the fact that violent and non-violent offenders were held together, and that before the riot led to problems, and during the riot was even worse, because several of the people within the prison were there for like marijuana crimes.
Yeah,
and, like,
simple stuff.
Like drug offenses and stuff like that. They were definitely not there because they were all violent offenders.
No.
Several of them were there due to injustice itself. So that's something that you also have to look at, right? Like shoplifting, for instance. We'll get into that later in one of the we're
going to put you next to the 10-time serial killer.
Exactly. We're going to put you next to the repeat offender murderers.
Yeah.
Right? Like the serial murdering, horrible, awful people. Now, on February 1st, hold on, let me try that again. Now, on the night that it all began, which was February 1st, 1980, a group of inmates were sitting in a dormitory drinking a home-brewed toilet wine made up of fermented raisins and yeast smuggled from the prison's kitchen. Now, if you're not familiar with what this is called, it's called Pruno, and it sounds awful, and I just would never drink it in a million. It just sounds
good at
so
all.
gross. But I mean, I guess so many of these prisoners were like, I need to drink. So they made Pruno fairly often. I mean, it's still pretty common in prisons to see inmates making toilet wine, which is like, can you, you're okay. You're first of all, raisins are gross.
Well,
like,
and
I don't
the reality
hate
is
raisins
like
in general.
You're fermenting this. You're fermenting this in a place that you can't clean. You can't clean that because they don't give you the chemicals to do so.
They don't care. They literally couldn't care less. But the problem is, like, one, raisins are gross. Yeah. But two,
I like
it wasn't always just fermented raisins. I mean, there were so many other things. There were so many other factors here. I think they used to make like with fermented any sort of fruit. I mean, if you look into the making of Pruno, it is fucking disgusting.
Oh yeah,
Pruno
I mean, they
is
use
super
like
gross.
rotten apple. They use like banana. It's just like whatever they could get their hands on, basically.
Yeah, exactly, and that's horrifying and in and of itself. But basically, on that night, there were several inmates who were super drunk on Pruno, and around 10:30 p.m., they were all yelling about taking over the prison. Now, according to a prisoner who was there, he was like, well, they won't do it. That's not going to happen. But only a couple hours later, that's exactly what they did. Now, in the early morning of February 2nd, prisoners in dormitory E-2 pretended to be asleep as 3 correctional officers made their way through the dormitory to shut down a room adjacent during a routine cell check. Now, prior to this, they all said, hey, if they leave the door open, unlocked, tonight, while they do their cell check, we're going to jump them and we're going to take over this prison. This is something that was actually said, corroborated by Gary Nelson, who was I was trying to remember his fucking name. Right. Gary Nelson, who was the eyewitness, the one who was actually there and during all this. Oh, awful horribleness.
Right.
Now, the Catalina wine mixer. Yes, this was the Catalina wine mixer in the NMSP. Yeah,
basically.
Exactly. Oh God, just Pruno just sounds so awful.
It does. It sounds like the worst thing ever, but I guess, when times are tough.
Now, the prisoners sprung out of their fake slumber and overpowered the guards as they noticed the door was left open. They immediately took them as prisoners, as the first hostages in a series of several hostages that would be taken, as well as they took their keys and their radios. Now, next, almost, I think 2 hours later, negotiations would start with the warden and the deputy warden, but we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, the real insanity of this is that it was the one time officers left the door to E2 actually unlatched. Literally, all of this could have been avoided if the officers simply latched the door to the dormitory, as the prisoners would have only been able to take them hostage and be locked in the dorm with them. But none of what's about to happen would have happened.
Well, and I think it should be noted that the reason that it wasn't locked is that the correctional officers themselves were actually kind of afraid to go do anything at night because the prison was so overcrowded. There were conversations that were there. They talked about how they were afraid, if their light died while they were walking through doing counting, that they may step on a prisoner and just, cause chaos. So a lot of this came down to just, oh, hey, did you do that? Oh yeah, totally. I did that, but I didn't do that, but I did do that.
But I didn't.
Just to avoid going in this place.
But yes, no, and that was a big thing. And another thing to also keep in mind is several of these correctional officers were not very well trained, because, well, they were super short-staffed. A lot of them were new and they didn't care. And another reason it may have been left unlatched is they just simply didn't want to latch it.
It was a revolving door of employment. So basically they were hiring people and saying, here's the prison, have fun.
Yeah. Again, this all could have been avoided. Everything that we were talking about could have been avoided if they would have just latched the door, but they were all too afraid to because their prison conditions were awful, completely terrible.
There were hundreds of people to each cell block instead of I think the capacity they said was something like 25.
Yeah, there was overcrowded.
They were on top of each other. They were literally on top of each other.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. Now, the next logical step was to unlock all the remaining cells via the control room, and a couple of sections had to be opened manually. Now, once this was done, the riot was absolutely in full swing, leading to insane amounts of gang violence, hostage torture, and some of the most grisly violence that I have ever read about. Now, I want to let you know, we're getting into some serious, heavy, trigger warning, awful territory. So if any of this is too much for you, please mute it. I completely understand. This is just what happened. These are from eyewitness accounts. We're going to talk about some of the violence that took place and the Aryan Brotherhood. So, that alone is
it's a bit much, but yeah.
Now, two gangs were the main source of the violence during the riot. The first being the Chicanos. The second being loosely the Aryan Brotherhood. Now, the Chicanos protected one another and immediately went after any grudges they had or known snitches. The Aryan Brotherhood, who was held in their own cell block to avoid conflict, immediately went to cell block 4. Now, cell block 4 was known for holding informants, sex crimes, mentally ill, and just generally vulnerable prisoners, making a total of 96.
Right.
Now, the need to take out snitches meant that the gangs had to pass through the psychology wing. And in doing so, they actually broke into several boxes of bulk drugs that they found in the pharmacy. Now, these drugs were actually used for mental patients, but there were so many downers there that the prisoners also started just fucking eating them up.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
They were
eating
getting
them
high.
Up, shooting them up. They were getting high as hell. It was absolutely insane, right? They were finding everything that they could in that psychology ward. And not only did they take it for themselves, but they took it to dose other prisoners. They did everything horrible that they possibly could with all the drugs that they found in the psychology ward. Real quick, Queen City Q, fucking hello. So good to see you. Welcome on in. Great to see you. We're talking about the Santa Fe prison riot. Harrowing shit. Trigger warning. Truly. Now, After doing this, they set fire to the office in the psychology wing. Wow. Which burnt psychological records that were preventing certain prisoners from obtaining parole. Now, in some ways, I'm like, okay, maybe these psychological records shouldn't stop them from being able to get parole. Yeah. However, I mean, a big part of this riot was prison reform, right? Because they were they were fucking fed up.
Right.
So I can kind of understand why they would do this, where they were coming from as far as burning psychological records.
Right.
What they did next, no one should ever do ever for any reason ever, because this is scenes from the worst, most horrific, just violence for violence sake horror movie.
Yeah.
And this is when it gets really bad. Now, upon the arrival to cell block 4, the prisoners realized they didn't have the keys to make their way in. So like any smart, calm, level-headed person, they grabbed blow torches that they had found in cell block 5, that they were there for construction purposes, and started literally melting away at the bars so they could get in. This process was going to take hours, so several prisoners actually went to the records office in order to determine who for sure was a snitch or informant. Now, just before dawn, Friday morning, the walkie-talkies of the prison guards started to go off with the information that cell block 4 was about to be taken, and that there was serious intent to kill. This information was actually provided by rioters with the walkie-talkies. Hey, we're going to go to cell block 4. We're going to go murder snitches. That's what we're going to go do right now.
Well, that's what they were looking for.
Now, all of these folks who, all of the correctional officers who were taken prisoner or hostage also knew all about this, right? Yeah. Now, one official stated on the walkie-talkie, it's their ass. Mm-hmm. And though the NM State Police were being begged by the prisoners, who were actually segregated in cell block 4 for their own safety, and there was a back door to cell block 4, they did nothing, as a deal with negotiators within the prison inside would have been broken. That negotiation was, as long as the prison guards held hostage were kept alive, the New Mexico State Police would not enter the building. Mm. This left the prisoners to their doomed fate.
Yeah, that's not a really good, that's not a good swap, right?
No, it's truly not. And again, it's 1980, so, prisons are probably at their worst, and prisoners are treated as literally inhuman. I mean, they're not people to several of these people. That's why the response of it's their ass, right? They don't care about human life. They care about the prison guards because they're more important, and whatever. That's their thinking, right? So they had no problem just saying, oh, well, maybe you shouldn't have snitched, even though we kind of talked you into doing that. Now, it should also be noted the keys to the back door were not super easily accessible, and it was only meant to be used in the case of emergencies. Isn't that some irony for you?
I'm pretty sure that constitutes an emergency at this point.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's an emergency. The prison is literally on fire.
Yeah.
There are crazy bloodthirsty prisoners who want to kill all the snitches who happen to be in cell block 4. Just saying. Now, when dawn broke on Friday morning, the prisoners had finally broken into cell block 4. What happens next is not for the faint of heart. The prisoners had formed what were known as execution squads. The prisoners in the execution squads were the ones who had cut through the bars of cell block 4. However, in doing so, they had burnt In doing so, they also burnt the security console that would open the cells within the block. Each cell had to have bars burnt off manually by blowtorches, basically the way that they got into cell block 4, right?
Right.
Now, just for a sidebar, can you imagine the absolute fucking terror of the people on the other side of those bars?
Watching them slowly cut their way in just so they can kill you.
Literally. Yes, they were prisoners themselves, but it must have just been so horrifying.
Oh, no, I can't imagine.
Because outside, I mean, obviously they've already started brutally beating and maiming people, so these men are covered in blood. They're bloodthirsty. They want nothing more than to literally murder you because you were an informant in a prison that encouraged you to do so.
Yeah.
And you're in the supposed safe block of said prison.
Not anymore.
And all you can do while you see these men literally manually burning away the iron bars that are keeping you from them, is wait.
Yeah.
And submit to your fate.
Yeah.
Now,
you're seeing what's going to happen to you outside those bars in front of you as they're cutting through those bars.
Yes, absolutely. Because
Horrible.
they weren't able to get to everyone at the same time. So the first people to get taken out of they saw what was happening.
Yeah.
And all they could do was, pray.
Yeah. That's all you can do. There's no escaping.
There's no escaping. These are squads too. I mean, it's not like you can defend yourself. No. You don't have a blowtorch, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Now we talk about, once they got through the bars, the prisoners inside of the cells were taken out. Now, some were tortured, some were dismembered, raped, burned alive, hanged, and even decapitated. By 10 a.m., 12 of the 96 prisoners were identified as snitches, and all of which were brutally murdered. Now, apparently, if you go into the prison, you can still see axe marks from decapitations and some burn marks from where a prisoner was burned alive.
Jesus.
By noon, 16 inmates were eviscerated, some literally dismembered and incinerated. The violence continued, and the violence just continued after that.
Yeah.
One account from a prisoner witness said he saw a man get tortured and murdered with a blowtorch, brutally running the flame up and down the prisoner's face until his head literally exploded. Eyes gouged, like bulging out, right? Until his head literally went.
God.
Pilot, thank you so much for the lyric. Appreciate you. If this is too much, I totally understand. Now, another horrifying and awful case was a prisoner named Mario Urioste, who was actually jailed for shoplifting, for stealing from a store. Okay.
Very, very small crime.
Yes.
In comparison.
Initially, he was placed in a violent unit. Again, this prison, bad news, violent and nonviolent offenders side by side, right? Where he was gang raped by 7 prisoners. He filed a lawsuit against said prisoners, which is why he was in cell block 4 in the first place, for his own protection. Okay.
Right.
He was found hanged with his throat slit and his own genitals shoved into his mouth.
Jesus.
Yeah. These were like the worst of the, I can't even like.
Yeah. These guys were not like, this was not like mercy. There was no mercy here.
There was zero mercy within this. Like nobody died quickly.
Awful.
Now, one man was found partially decapitated after being thrown over the balcony with a noose tied around his neck. His corpse was then dragged and dismembered. A pile of corpses was brought into the prison's gymnasium where they were burned. This fire got so out of control that it burned the roof off of the building. Like, what is this? Is this the Black Plague? Like, gee, this is like some like
this.
What?
It's. I mean, it could only be described as rage, right? It's just pure rage.
You can't even.
And it was trying to send a message, and
they were filling. They were filling the prison with pure, unadulterated hate. That's truly what it was, right? Now, so burn off the roof of the building. People were killed with things such as pipes, shivs, work tools, really anything to continue the violence. Now, blood lined the walls, the floors, the ceilings, and prisoners throughout. The total death count, mind you, is 33. However, this number may actually be much higher, as head count was not kept in the prison. And the amount of sheer carnage didn't allow for a true count because several prisoners would not be accounted for, whether it be because they were completely dismembered with 0 limbs or their bodies were completely incinerated. Like, I'm not even joking. That's truly something to take into account here. They were incinerated.
Right.
And also take into consideration that several of the prisoners within the prison actually just hid. They barricaded themselves in their cells.
That's what I would have done.
And it was only these execution squads and these gangs that were really like, let's go and fucking murder everybody, set everything on fire. I mean, it was just truly insane.
I mean, if you have the option to hide, like that's your only way out is to hide.
Yeah,
like,
absolutely.
There's no just walking out the back door. Like you had to hide.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What are you going to do? There's no back door, right?
Right. You can't fight back.
It was in cell block 4.
Yeah. There's no fighting back against that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's locked.
Yeah.
So like, what are you going to do?
Right.
One thing I forgot to say too is they actually went into the records office and burned all of the records as well. Like they just went around and caused absolute chaos.
They did a lot of things that made a lot of sense, like burning records and, destroying evidence and kind of like trying to wipe slates clean.
Mm-hmm.
But the violence didn't really make sense.
Well, they were just mad at the snitches,
Yeah,
truthfully.
right.
I mean, like, seriously, you killed the shoplifter who you gang raped.
Right.
Like, this man who was in prison for shoplifting and you committed atrocities on, he filed a lawsuit against you, but, like, fuck you. You deserve that.
Yeah.
Like, 100%. So they went in and just fucking ruined him. They literally did the worst of the worst to him.
It's awful.
Maybe not the worst of the worst. I mean, he wasn't just decapitated, but he wasn't burned alive or anything, but Jesus, man. Now, through all of this, obviously negotiations had to take place because this is a riot. They had hostages. I dropped something. They had hostages, many of whom were correctional officers, and because the only people that matter were correctional officers, the warden and the deputy warden and the superintendent of correctional facilities were on site within 30 minutes of the riot. Now, when the riot broke out, prisoners had taken the officers' two-way radios as well as their keys. At 1:57 a.m., the control room heard the first recorded radio transmission by an inmate with the radio. Now, I don't know what kind of voice he would have, but I'm going to pretend like it's Shanny.
Okay.
We got the shift commander hostage. There had better be a meeting with the governor, the news media, and Rodriguez. Now, the future course of the uprising will be frequently aimless and wild, with shifting and uncertain leadership, and often politics will be an apparent afterthought. Yet this clipped ultimatum will be testimony that the larger cause is always there. About half an hour after the riot began, warden, deputy warden, and superintendent of correctional facility were at the gatehouse. They decided to attempt negotiations because, they had the correctional officers and, obviously they didn't want them dead. Right. That's all it was. They just didn't want them dead. And basically the main source of negotiation here was, hey, we won't come in as long as none of them die. Whatever. We can negotiate whatever you want. Now, the inmates' requests were very clear. They wanted federal officials brought to the prison to ensure no inmates would be retaliated against in the aftermath of the revolt. They wanted prisoners reclassified so first-timers with short sentences were no longer housed by side with violent lifers. They also wanted an end to the overcrowding and harassment by guards. They wanted better food, better educational, and better recreational facilities, and a new disciplinary committee. These are things that are pretty good.
These are pretty simple demands.
I hate to side with the prisoners in this case, but what they're asking is not a lot.
Right. Like, the demands made sense, and they were ignored, and then it escalated. So, it's the prison's fault. 100%.
The prison is truly at fault here.
Yeah, because they ignored what were simple requests to make things a little bit more, comfortable. Like, I know prison's not supposed to be comfortable, but Jesus, these are normal things that should be just common sense,
This should be. Prison should be about reform, not about punishment.
Yeah.
So you should be trying to make these people into better people. And for those who can't be, they can live there. The end.
So it's like you want to side with them, but you can't side with them because of what they did.
The accounts of reported beatings from all of these fucking correctional officers and the warden himself and all these terrible things is like, okay.
Yeah.
No wonder this powder keg finally blew up.
Oh, no. It was just a ticking time bomb. That's all it was.
It was truly chaos. It was true chaos.
Yeah.
Because even, obviously there were tortures and murders and rapes and everything horrible that could possibly be happening. But you have to think about why.
Yeah. And
it all could have been avoided for several reasons.
Absolutely.
Now, by Saturday evening, the inmates allowed for a few of the guards to be released, specifically those in need of medical attention because they were beaten brutally. They didn't get nothing. They just didn't get killed.
Yeah.
Which is, something to notate here.
Yeah.
Specifically, one man who was bleeding profusely from his head was carried out on a blanket. And the other two who were brutally tortured and raped. None of the negotiations were recorded and no agreements were ever met. But the goal of negotiators was to stall until the NMSP could get their way in. Now, negotiations went on into Sunday morning before the prison was finally raided by heavily armed state troopers. The prisoners surrendered, and once again, order was kind of restored. Now, one thing I want every single one of you to take away from this right now is that none of these requests were met.
Yeah.
Literally none of them. And this is all whilst the fucking the Duran Decree was still very much a big thing happening in the prison, right?
Right.
And none of these were met, right? Literally none of them. All of this was just negotiators saying, "Hey, what's up?" You know?
Yeah.
Let our correctional officers out. 1 second. Z Remmers, holy frickin' frick, dude. Good to see you. Cynical Ace, what's going on? This is the tale of Captain Jack Sparrow.
It is.
Let's frickin' go. Welcome to the podcast, Cynical Ace. I hope you enjoy true crime or generally horrible things. We're actually about to end the podcast. We're coming up to our closing with some fun information. So, once again, none of this ever happened. And, you know, as is, history is always doomed to repeat itself. This didn't happen in the case of Santa Fe prison, however. Thank God. Thank God. Good Lord. However, they didn't learn their lesson by any means. I mean, the prison was opened up, I think 5 days later, and it housed the same prisoners, several of them the violent offenders who had literally just murdered 33 people minimum and injured countless others days prior. Now, the prison remained open for another 18 years. It was finally shut down in 1998. But
this shit was still open when we were kids.
Yeah, this shit was still open when we were kids.
Good Lord.
Right? And all they ever did to make sure something like this didn't happen again was they got more strict. And it's like, what the fuck, man?
Right. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why you couldn't have met those simple, like, requests. Like,
I don't even get it. I don't
understand it at all.
It's like infuriating to me. Z Remmers with the fun fact. Did you know the average cost to cost one prisoner for a year is $34,000?
Jesus.
Reform does seem cheaper. Absolutely. I mean, just give these folks the right programs, get these people the right things. And that guy that I talked about earlier, Gary Nelson, he is he's now a retired defense attorney.
Yeah.
I mean, like, he got out and he was one of those rare exceptions who actually truly did get through this, right? And he was one of those that surrendered with the rest of them. But he was there from the beginning. He was there during the Pruno drinking. He was there during the murders. I mean, he was just keeping his head down.
Yeah.
I mean, what else do you do?
Right.
Now, that is the end of our tale about the Santa Fe prison riot. One of the bloodiest, most violent, most heinous stories that we've ever covered, but also pieces of history in New Mexico.
Yeah, it's close to home for us.
Yeah, it is. It's very close. I mean, it's not far at all. And the funniest thing, you'd think, okay, all this horrible shit happened there. They're definitely going to demolish it, right, Matt? Right? They're definitely going to demolish it.
Oh,
Matt,
yeah,
right,
that was
Matt?
my first question when I was reading about this. I was like, it's gone, right? It's gone?
It's gone. Nope.
Nope.
The prison is actually still up to this day. It was closed in 1998 and is now used as Capital Hotelscape, a tourist attraction and film set.
Yeah.
Notably, the film The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler was filmed.
Was it really?
In the Santa Fe prison, the New Mexico State Penitentiary.
Jesus.
Lampfrost, what's going on, buddy? Good to see you.
Hey, Lampfrost.
Yes, not even joking. The Longest Yard with Adam Sandler.
Good
that
Lord.
fucking movie was filmed there. And then there have been countless others. In fact, I might
that
even
place
look
is
up a
haunted.
list.
It has to be haunted. It's haunted. 100%.
Oh, dude. 100%. People who've gone on the tours say they experience the most paranormal activity they've ever experienced.
Oh, yeah, it's haunted. It has to
I mean,
be.
it's truly haunting.
Yeah.
Like I said, you can see axe marks in the floor. You can see burn marks from where the man was burned alive and his fucking head exploded.
Yeah, it's haunted.
I mean, these are things that are still there to this day. And now, you and I, we could pay $15 each to walk through the halls of Cell Block 4.
Do a TechMess field trip.
Where glass cases now line the block, filled with various weapons.
I had the same idea.
Glass cases now line Cell Block 4, filled with various weapons that were used during the brutal riot, and reminders of what had happened. Now, as much as I would love to do a TechMess field trip, and it was the first thing that came to mind, they do not allow cameras. Matt,
Bummer.
Where'd you go? Oh, you kind of you said oh shit, but you didn't say oh shit.
I'm here. Oh shit.
Okay, there we go. Cameras are not allowed. You cannot take pictures. I think you could take pictures everywhere but Cell Block 4, because Cell Block 4 is truly where the most atrocities were taking place.
That's where the worst of it happened.
If we could get those like super spoopy like pen cam or like
Z's ahead of you, man. He's already figuring it out.
The glasses like with a camera in them, but they look like normal glasses or something like that, I would totally do it. But I don't think it would go over well. Now we could go full douche fart YouTubers, bring our cameras and be like, yeah, we're vloggers, and I wanted to see about possibly getting in to the prison for my Morbid Message Monday, where we have 100 subscribers, and we would like to like a press pass or something. We have to
talk like that one idiot on YouTube. Santa Fe Prison Riot.
Santa Fe Prison Riot. Like literally. But it is something that can be seen. So if you're ever in New Mexico and you want to see something horrible from true crime history, go check out the New Mexico State Penitentiary. It's only $15.
Souvenir shop, I'm sure. There's got to be one.
Oh, bet.
Indirect Steak, hello.
Indirect Steak, what's going on? Bet. EMF 5, STI 33. You're absolutely right. Go in there with an EMF reader. Oh, man. I'm sure it's horrifying. But
just walk around with an EMF reader.
I'll go there as soon as I wake up. Nutter TTV, what's going on? Good to see you, buddy.
How you doing?
Indirect Steak, welcome on in. Good to see you guys. But folks, that is where we end our horrifying, harrowing, terrifying tale of the New Mexico State Penitentiary prison riot.
Pretty awful, man.
Awful. Just awful. And a true testament to reformation over punishment. Mm-hmm. And true, I mean, it is literally, you can see it. It's all right there, dude. Mm-hmm. It's all fucking right there.
Yeah.
But that's where we leave you, folks. Thank you so much for a year of Morbid Message Monday.
One whole year.
One freaking year, folks. 1 year of Morbid Message Monday and TechMess Talks as a whole. You should do stories of the worst prison of USA.
Virginia?
Virginia? Are you talking about the one in Virginia?
Well, you can do that.
Or are you making a joke? I can't honestly tell.
I think
we may do that. I would actually like to do more prisons. If you liked this episode, oh god damn it, Steak. He's already starting. But yeah, actually, once if y'all liked this episode, I'd love to do more.
Yeah,
more prison stories. I mean,
we're going to continue breaking into new spooky, weird, crazy, horrible stories. So, like,
absolutely.
If you have suggestions in the Discord, make sure you drop those suggestions. We will cover them.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
We're going to get into more cryptids. We're going to get into more aliens. We're going to get into more everything, man. And if y'all like the SCP stuff, we'll get back into that. But only if you tell me you like it. Yeah. But folks, thank you so much again for joining us for another episode of Morbid Message Monday. Don't forget to follow us on all the things, like the stuff. Make sure you follow on Spotify if that's where you're listening. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe, share it with your friends. It's the only way that we can get this to more people. Because, you know, you want them to learn about the New Mexico State Penitentiary prison riot, too. Everybody should know about it.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
Again, my name is Jake.
My name is Matt.
I hope you have a great evening, day, night, whatever it happens to be that you're having, kindly listener. And well,
goodbye.